Hello and welcome back. You're looking at Cale Makar, who currently leads the entire NHL in scoring, and he's averaging an absolutely mind-boggling 1.88 points per game. Now, a while back, I made an entire video about McDavid versus Gretzky and how McDavid at that 1.9 point per game level was insane for the modern NHL, and here we have a defenseman at that level, which is absolutely crazy. So, obviously, he's only 8 games in. This should come back to earth a little bit, but it's absolutely incredible nonetheless. I wanted to take a moment to shout out this incredible achievement. But today, we're looking at the Week 4 schedule, and there's a lot to go over, so let's jump right in. Now, 52 games this week, there are no light nights, so the complete opposite of last week. Last week, we had that huge schedule on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, and there was a trickle of games on the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. This week, there's basically no light nights. Everything is pretty even. Saturday's a little bit heavier than some of the other days, but this opens up a lot of opportunities off the waiver wire, and I'll cover some of the top candidates in just a minute. We're not going to go team by team. Now, we have 11 teams total that play 4 times. You can see them over here: Tampa Bay, San Jose, Washington, Boston, Seattle, Calgary, Toronto, Chicago, Winnipeg, Columbus, and the Islanders. Of those teams, you've got San Jose with a back-to-back, Seattle, Toronto, and Chicago, all with back-to-backs. So a bunch of teams with 4 games and no back-to-backs. And really, when you're looking at the best schedules, these are kind of just a sprinkling of teams that you can pick players from and some of the better schedules. So in terms of best schedule, I put Boston at the top because they're going to get Philadelphia twice, and Philadelphia has been horrendous. So if for whatever reason they use Fedotov in either of these games, that's going to be a high-scoring game for Boston players. Fedotov has looked terrible so far this season. Their defense has looked terrible, and they're struggling to score. Their power play is actually not as bad as it usually is, though. They do have this difficult game on Thursday, and then this game should be relatively low scoring on Sunday, and it is a back-to-back with travel, so that is worth noting. You have Calgary with a nice Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday spread, but you do have some difficult games here, a bunch of teams that are really good or that have underperformed, like Edmonton, and you do have Vegas here, who's usually good defensively. You've got Jersey and Utah, so not the easiest schedule. You do have Chicago here. The reason I'm putting them here is they have a game against San Jose and they have a game against the Ducks. Those should be games where you can find some scoring. And even this game, if they have Georgiev in against Chicago trying to build up his confidence, he's been terrible so far. So maybe this is a higher scoring game as well. But all of these games on the road, so that is maybe not the most advantageous schedule, but you could find some scoring here because of these two matchups. For Columbus, you've got a number of very difficult teams. Edmonton, that's going to be a tough game for them. Obviously, it is at home at least. You have the Islanders. That should be relatively low scoring just because of the Islanders' lack of offense this year. This is a very tough game on Friday against Winnipeg, and then they've got the road back-to-back, or the back-to-back with travel, going to Washington on Saturday. Then you've got the Islanders. They have a relatively favorable schedule with some easier matchups. You've got Anaheim, Columbus, and Buffalo. And then they've got a difficult game against the Rangers. For whatever reason, their games against the Rangers are relatively high scoring. So maybe factor that in. Maybe pick up somebody on the top 6 that you can get some exposure on that power play too. There are some guys you can find. And then with San Jose, you've got maybe one game here where you can find some offense. This San Jose-Chicago game should be a little bit more open. The rest of these games, maybe not. Utah, a little bit worse defensively since losing Jersey and not having Marino. But with that said, Vancouver should be tough. LA should be tough. And this is, I believe, still part of this ridiculous Kings road trip that they're still on as they're renovating their building. Then last but not least, we have the 7-0 undefeated Winnipeg Jets with a perfect Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. And these are some difficult games, some easier games. It's hard to make sense of what anybody is going to bring. These are all basically 500 teams right now. Toronto should be better than they are. Detroit didn't look great earlier on. They've kind of turned it around lately. You've got Columbus here and then Tampa Bay at the tail end of the week. And again, there are some other schedules. One thing I do want to mention, though, as we look at the worst schedules this week, New Jersey with 2 games, Dallas with 2, Detroit with 2. Now, of those schedules, Dallas has the worst. They've got a home-and-home back-to-back against the defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. So if you have any fringe Dallas guys, you're going to want to pick somebody else up off waivers to try to fill in some volume. You're not necessarily going to want to drop those guys because Dallas is still a very good team. and they have basically 3 scoring lines and a couple of pairs of D that can get it done for you. So, and both of their goaltenders are ownable in fantasy right now. So don't drop those guys, but you definitely want to add some volume off the waiver wire. And with all of that said, Tampa Bay, we didn't mention them here. They have a good Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday schedule, but they're all difficult Central Division teams. They've got Nashville Monday, Colorado, Minnesota, and Winnipeg. So all very difficult Central Division matchups, 3 of 4 on the road. So that is a little bit more difficult, but we will cover a couple of Tampa Bay players. And then with Washington, they have the Rangers on Tuesday, Montreal Thursday, Columbus Saturday. So 2 winnable games in the middle of the week, but then a back-to-back with travel going to Carolina on Sunday. So that will be difficult finding offense other than those 2 games in the middle of the week. So didn't have room to cover all of these teams, these 11 teams that are playing 4 times. But just take a note, Jersey, Dallas, Detroit, you might want to add some stuff off the waiver wire to fill in some volume if you own any of these guys like Hughes, maybe, Mo Sider. If you're looking for D with hits and blocks, you can find some of those on the wire. So we're going to get into that right now as we transition over. Now, this is going to be a little bit different than what we normally do. We're going to take a look at the prototype player hub for this season and take a look at some guys that you can find off the waiver wire. So what we're looking at here is this team filter is filtered out to just the teams with 4 games this week. So these are the guys that you can potentially find. Up here, we've got the combined rating, the completeness rating, and the weighted rating. So you can see how everybody stacks up. This is what I've been using. This is a nice balance between these two. If you're just looking for completeness and category coverage, you would use this one. Right off the top, we got Mikael Granlund up here. He's probably your best ad this week. Center right wing, dual position eligible, 34% owned. And as we look at his hub, he's been getting a lot of shot volume, 3.63 shots per game, a ton of power play production, 6 power play points in 8 games. He does hit a little bit as well, 1 hit per game. He's quarterbacking that top, not quarterbacking, he's the number 1 center and on that top power play with Celebrini out, and he's above a point per game. So a guy with all of those credentials at 34% ownership, he should be on your radar in a week where he's going to get 4 games of volume. In addition to that, we've got a little bit further down, Yegor Chinakhov. He's one of the better guys that you can add in terms of category coverage. He's also averaging 3.3 shots per game, really good power play numbers, 3 power play points on the season in a 6-game sample size. He is also above a point per game, 1.17 points per game, 3 goals, 4 assists, nice split there, a couple of power play points. He is 28% owned, and he's a little bit more complete. He's on line 2 and power play 1, so he's going to get you a lot of that coverage. And then another guy that we have to talk about, he might be down here. We're going to look at his teammate, which is Kirill Marchenko. He's 1.33 points per game, a little bit lower shot volume, a little bit lower power play production, only 1 power play point. So you're getting less shot volume, you're getting no hits, you're getting just a smattering of blocks, not much there, but you are getting pretty good offensive numbers, 8 points in 6 games. He's a single position right wing along with Chinakhov. He's 12% owned, line 1 and power play 1. So both of these guys getting power play 1 exposure. Chinakhov is more complete, and therefore he's 28% owned. Marchenko, a little bit less complete, but 12%, and you're still getting that power play exposure. So 2 guys from Columbus that you could potentially add in a week where they're going to get 4 games, that would help you out. Another guy that we have to talk about, and this is an early season trend, Dylan Strome, 9 points in 3 games. He's got 2 power play points. The shot volume is a little bit low, but he's, I believe, the top line center. He's been getting it done last year and now taking that into this year. He's getting some blocks, getting some power play production as well, 2 power play points in 6 games. Basically an assist a game plus 3 goals added to that and 1.5 points per game. So he's definitely got to be on your radar. Single position center, he is 45% owned, and he's currently on a 6-game point streak. They do play today as I'm recording this, so maybe that ends, but even with that, he's been very productive, and he's on a great line assignment on the top line in Washington and top power play as well. So he's got to be on your radar as we head into this week. Now, I did want to mention McCann, but he is relatively owned up. He's been getting it done for Seattle, 1.38 points per game. Shot volume a little bit low for a goal scorer like him, but 4 goals, 7 assists, 11 points. I believe his ownership is in the mid-70s, so he's probably not available for you there. If you wanted another option from Washington, Connor McMichael, 8 points in 6 games. Really good assist numbers, goal numbers, shot volume a little bit lower, no power play points yet, and doesn't hit or block, so a little bit less complete, but you can find him at 12% ownership, and he's got 7 points in his last 4 games. So this is a guy who's red hot as they're entering a 4-game week, so that's something to keep an eye on your waiver wire. And this is why we mention a lot of those pushing back centers in terms of your draft strategy. There's a number of guys here. We're going to take a look at Anthony Cirelli here, another single position center, 14% ownership. He's got 5 points in his last 2 games. He's on power play too. And you can see here 8 assists, 7 games played, so over an assist per game, 9 points. So that puts him at 1.29 points per game. And he's got a power play point in there as well. 1 hit and 1.14 blocks per game, so a little bit of peripheral coverage. You wish the shot volume was a little bit better, a little bit more of a pass-happy guy. He did have a 4-assist game a couple days ago against New Jersey, so that's where a lot of that point production came from, but still, second line, and he's getting power play 2 usage, so that's something that you should keep an eye on if you're looking for some Tampa Bay ads. One other single position center we want to talk about is Sean Monahan, line 1, power play 1. That's what you like to hear. He's only 16% owned, and you're getting really good production right now with the shot volume, 3.5 shots per game, 1.17 points per game. Goal and assist numbers are good, 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points in 6 games with a power play point in there as well. So getting that exposure in Columbus, this could be a guy that you could hold for a little bit longer than that because he's probably going to maintain that spot. You could also go with Adam Fantilli. I don't have his ownership off the top of my head, but both of those guys should be available in your leagues, and they both have a 4-game week this week, so that should favor them as well. You also have a guy that we haven't talked about. I talked about a little bit in the preseason. Tom Wilson is back to form. So if you're paying attention, I believe it was last year, he was the first year back off of his major injury, lower body. I believe it was an Achilles or a knee or something like that. He comes back. He starts to find his form a little bit, but this year he's pretty much back to where he used to be. Lots of hits, 2.5 hits per game, 1.5 blocks per game. The goal numbers are really good, 5 goals in 6 games, 6 points. And the shot volume is not bad, 2.3 shots per game. Not going to get you a lot of assists. He never has. But he is getting some power play time, and he is hitting everything that moves and scoring goals. That's what you like to see out of Tom Wilson. He's 48% owned. So maybe not available for you in a 12-team, but if you're in a 10-team league, he should definitely be scooped up. No matter what your league format is, if you're in a categories league, he's going to cover a lot of those hits and blocks coverage. And then even if you're in a points league, he's going to give you a nice floor every game. And then when he scores, it's going to be a nice point setup for you as well. Now, another guy we have to talk about, and this is a Calgary play. I don't know if he's available depending on your league size. 42% owned, Blake Coleman. As I pick him up here on the top, we'll start it off with a guy who I have never heard of until I started doing this exercise, Jack Thompson. Only 3 games played, but 3 points. He's got 3 points in his last 2 games. He was brought over in the trade for Anthony Duclair from Tampa, and now he's on one of the power play units. He's got 3 power play points. So he is, I believe, power play 2, and he might be a little bit further down in the depth chart, but he is getting 16 to 20 minutes of time on ice per game. Again, 3 points in the last 2 games. He's only 1% owned. So if we're looking at guys on the Sharks that nobody knows about, nobody cares about, this is a guy that nobody knows. You know, right now he's off to a really good start. If you're looking in terms of Sharks, you would probably think of a guy like Jake Wallman, and you got to scroll pretty far to find him down here, so we're not even going to find him there. We'll type him in just to show you the difference here. Wallman is probably your best option because he's quarterbacking power play 1, and he does get you some peripherals, 1.75 blocks, 1.25 hits, 2.75 shots per game. So all of that you like to see. The offensive production, 2 points in 8 games, is a lot lower. He does have a power play point. Wallman is 13% owned. So there's the difference. If you're just looking for a guy who's hot right now heading into the week and going to get some power play production, Jack Thompson is a guy at 1% in a deep league you can find. If you're in a shallower league and you want that peripheral coverage with power play 1 exposure, Jake Wallman at 13% can do it for you. And again, these are 2 guys that nobody really wants because they're on San Jose. If you're in a league with plus minus, you definitely want to ignore anybody on San Jose because that's not going to be advantageous. They still have yet to win a game, so definitely keep that in mind if you're in a league with plus minus. Now, as we look at this, right underneath Jack Thompson, you've got J.J. Moser, who was really good for Arizona last year. in stretches when they needed him to quarterback the power play. He's not getting power play time right now, but he is relatively offensively productive. 6 points in 7 games, 2 goals, 4 assists for a defenseman. I believe these are positional percentiles. I have to adjust my script for this because this is not necessarily what I want to do this year. But with that said, for defensemen, 95th percentile in terms of goal production. Shot volume is low, not much in terms of peripherals. You're getting a couple blocks, 1.43 blocks per game. And Moser is power play 2, so he is going to get a little bit of power play exposure, 14% owned. So if you can, stomach the lack of power play 1 time, maybe not getting that exposure to Kucherov, this is an option. You also have Darren Radish, who's on that second power play unit. He's been bumped down from the top unit, so you could go that route as well. Now, another guy that is relatively low ownership, and there's not that many of them on this list. You can see a lot of these guys are owned up, but Mason Lohrei. So 4 points in 6 games. He's top pair with Charlie McAvoy, and he is getting a little bit of power play time, power play 2. He's 2% owned, so a guy who's potentially going to get you a couple power play points here and there. He is relatively skilled for a big player. 4 points in 6 games. You could do a lot worse than this. The only problem is if you're getting a guy who's not on the top power play, I would prefer them to have a nice peripheral floor, which he does not. So if you're looking for that, just stay tuned for just a second. We've got some hits and blocks options coming up. But before we get to that, another guy that I haven't really heard of, Jake Christensen. So he's in Columbus right now. He is, playing pretty well, all things considered. 4 points in 6 games is not bad. Shot volume relatively low. Again, no peripherals to speak of, but did want to mention him that he's a guy at 0% ownership. So all you deep league players out there who complain that I don't give you anything, there's a guy 0%, and you got Jack Thompson 1%. So 2 guys that are getting it done early in the season that you can find on every waiver wire, no matter where you're playing in fantasy. So these are some options for you if you're looking for some offense. Do also want to mention Riker Evans. 5 points in 8 games, 2 goals, 3 assists, and a power play point. He does get a little bit of hitting in there, 1.5 hits per game, 1.75 shots, 1.13 blocks. So basically same as Christensen and Jack Thompson, but you are getting a little bit more peripherals. And he is 5% owned, so he should be available for you in most league sizes. But now we're going to take a look at some hits and blocks options because this is pretty much what you're going to want in terms of volume. If you're looking for volume, and you have some of those Dallas or New Jersey guys or anything like that where you're going to want some volume as opposed to some offensive production, there are guys that you can find on the waiver wire that are going to get you that. We'll start it off with Faravari. So I'm going to sort this by hits, and here's where we got Faravari at the top. 3.17 hits per game, 99th percentile there. 2.5 blocks per game, so 87th percentile there. 1 point on the year, so you're not getting a lot of offense. He doesn't shoot the puck at all. You're getting almost nothing offensively whatsoever, but you are getting a ton of hits and blocks. So if that's what you need, here's a guy that you can go out and grab. He is only 3% owned. So in a week where you have a pretty decent schedule for Washington to find some hits and blocks volume, he's probably your best option off of this entire list. But you also have Nikita Zadorov. He's 20% owned. 3 hits per game, a little bit less in terms of blocks, 1.38 blocks per game. Shot volume a little bit better at 1.38. I would like to see it higher than that. 3 points on the year is not bad. He's 20% owned, and he does occasionally get some exposure to Pastrnak, who you definitely would want if you're going to hope that he's out there with somebody that can get him the puck. So that is favorable. Washington has a little bit less up front to work with, but they have been moving the puck around a little bit. But he's going to be a little bit more of an offensive option for you for hits and blocks. We also have Braden Paschal. Don't even know how to say that last name, but hits 2.43 hits per game. Blocks a little bit lower at 1 block per game, so not a lot there, but you are getting some pretty good hits coverage, and he is pretty much ownable in every league size, 0% owned. You also have McElrath at 0% ownership. And if you're in a league with penalty minutes, you're going to want to grab him. He does like to fight. That's one of the ways he's going to stay in the NHL. He's been a up and down guy between the minors and the professional ranks in the last couple of seasons, and he did get in a nice minute-long fight the other day. I forget what game that was, but right off the top, they got into a huge fight. So penalty minutes, this is your guy, and he's 0% owned, so he should be there for you in every league size. A little bit further down, Mario Ferraro used to be an excellent hits and blocks option. 2 hits per game, 2 blocks per game is not bad. No points, only 1 shot per game, 8 games on the year. So another San Jose guy that nobody really wants. he's probably available for you on your waiver wire. 0% ownership in terms of where you can grab him, pretty much every league size. There are a number of other options, but I do want to cover some guys that are a little bit higher ownership. You got Jake McCabe here at 20%, and 3 points on the year compared to a lot of these guys with 0 is going to be favorable. That's why he's 20% owned. You got 2.38 hits, 1.75 blocks per game. The shots are very low, so I don't like that, but the assist numbers are at least a little bit better than some of these other guys. As we look at a couple of other guys, we've got Romanov, who used to be a nice hits and blocks option. Again, pretty similar. 2 hits, 2.71 blocks. Everybody on Long Island blocks shots, so that's nice to see. His shot volume is arguably double what some of these other guys are, like McCabe and McElrath, etc. So you're getting a little bit more shots, a little bit of hits and blocks. So if you're in a categories league, this would be an option. He's only 9% owned. If you're looking for another Islander with a little bit better offensive performance, 4 points in 7 games, you've got Adam Pelech. He has 2 hits per game, 1 block per game, and some decent shot volume as well there. And last but not least, I did want to cover Oliver Ekman-Larsson, because if he's available and you're in a shallow league, he's worth an add as he is quarterbacking the top power play unit in Toronto. 2.75 shots per game is nice. 1.88 hits per game is also nice, but he is 50% owned. So obviously a guy with a little bit more exposure. People in the Toronto market are going to have him pretty much owned up at this point. So maybe not available for you, but I did want to mention him as he is getting some hits, getting some shots, and he is getting some offensive production as well. Now, as we take a look at the goalie hub for the first time this year, it's still coming together. There's still some kinks to be worked out. But first thing to notice, Philip Gustafsson having a crazy bounce back year. You can see he dropped from almost an 80 down to a 61. He's now up to a 91. Minnesota been very good defensively. 2.43 goals against, expected goals against per game. He's well above expected. Excellent save percentage, 9.52, 1.4 goals against, and that's why Minnesota is having so much success. Here's Connor Hellebuck. You expect to see him up there. Stolars, when he was getting those starts without Wall in the net, he was doing very well, 5.3 above expected. Toronto, 63rd percentile in terms of Team D, 938 save percentage, and a 1.8 goals against. But Joseph Wall is back in the net, at least for the time being, so it is now officially a timeshare. As we look at some guys that you can get on the waiver wire, Justus Anonen is the obvious guy that we have to talk about, with Georgiev kind of losing the net already. This is unfortunate for me because I obviously drafted him in the Fantasy Puck Creators League and then dropped him because they refused to start him for the first 5 games of the season. So now somebody else scooped in and picked him up, which is tragic. But he's at 36% ownership. The little bit above expected, 1.73 above expected. Team defense looks good. They were not getting the goaltending. That's why their actual goals against is so poor. 917 save percentage, 2.1 goals against is nice to see as well. Now, another guy you can pick up off the waiver wire is Lucas Dostal. This team defense you don't want any part of. However, he's getting a ton of start volume right now. And he's playing pretty well. So 6.7 above expected. He, I believe, is number 1 or number 2 in goals saved above expected. A ton of shot volume, 91st percentile there. 936 save percentage, 2.2 goals against. So all excellent numbers. Their team is not very good, but he has been. And I remember he made a 45 save performance the other night. And that's obviously going to help with your save volume. And if you're in a points league where you're getting 1 point per save, that's obviously a place where you'd want to pick up Dostal. Again, 42% owned. As we move down to the surprising Calgary Flames, Dustin Wolf is available. He's 51% owned, so maybe not there in a 12-team league, but in a 10-teamer, he is there. The team defense is surprising. So 89th percentile, 2.77 expected goals against per game. He is a little bit above expected, 936 save percentage, 2.3 goals against. Obviously, with all of these numbers, this is a small sample size, so it is worth mentioning. That's why I haven't started the goalie hub until now, just to get a little bit of data in there so that the results aren't crazy skewed, but they are still going to be a small sample size bias, so you do have to keep that in mind as we look at these numbers. But again, Dustin Wolf, 51% ownership. As we move down, another guy I picked up, Alex Lyon, kind of taking the net over in Detroit. They did start Talbot the other night on Thursday, but Lyon put up a shutout, came back and played this afternoon as I record this on Saturday. He is only 31% owned, and if you look at that save percentage, 955, that again is not taking into account today's game where he gave up at least 3. 1.5 goals against, 6.4 above expected. The team defense is atrocious, though, so that is something to note. They did lock it down against the Islanders the other night when he did get that shutout, so hopefully they can continue to improve defensively, and that number can come up, which would make him even more fantasy relevant. Now, back onto the Calgary train, if you're not going to be able to pick up Dustin Wolf, Dan Vladar is a decent option at 7% ownership. They, again, have that pretty good team defense. He is above expected, 904 save percentage, 2.7 goals against, and I would imagine that this is a timeshare, if not a complete like 1A, 1B situation. It could be, a little bit skewed in favor of one guy or the other, but all it takes is a little bit of a dip from Dustin Wolf. He's the younger goaltender. They could potentially go right back to the a little bit more experienced Vladar and get some veteran leadership as they try to continue off this hot start that they've started out with. They were one of the top teams in the Pacific last time I checked, so this is an excellent story in Calgary. Another excellent story, Joel Hofer. He's available on the waiver wire, 18% ownership. It is probably still Binnington's net, and it will be for the foreseeable future. But whenever they start Hofer, he's one of the more quality backups that you can find. We're going to go over one other guy, but a 932 save percentage, 2.3 goals against, just slightly above expected, and just slightly above 50th percentile in terms of Team D. He does have a shutout already, so that is worth noting. If you're in a points league that weighs those heavily, he did do a little bit of that last year, and then he's picking up right where he left off this year. Now, I do want to mention Joey Decord. He is a little bit higher owned at 60%, but in a shallow league, if you're still not on him, this is a case where we saw this in the offseason. Look at this trend line from a 32 to an 81. We expected regression. If he's regressing to this area and he's the 15th goalie off the board, he's still very valuable. So this team defense, still really good at 80th percentile, just a shade below expected. 907 save percentage is fine. 3.0 goals against is fine as well. Maybe not the best file you'll see, but it is really solid. And Seattle is scoring a lot more than they did last year. So that team defense is nice, and now they're getting the run support. So that is worth mentioning. Now, another backup that we can find, Casey DeSmith. This is probably one of your best options. Playing for Dallas. Dallas should be better than this. This is, in my opinion, a small sample size thing. But he is well above expected. 4.5 goals saved above expected. One shutout already. 936 and a 1.7 goals against. So he's one of the more reliable backups in general in previous stops, but now coming over to Dallas, they're a very good defensive team, a very good team in general, so they should be giving him the support that he needs. So whenever you see him getting a spot start, you can go out and grab him and feel pretty confident about that. Now, a couple other guys we got to talk about just a little bit further down. You can see some of these guys that you would expect to be higher. Jeremy Swayman, not off to a great start. He's obviously owned up. Tons of save volume so far. Only 2 wins in 6 games. Boston has to get their stuff going, but they do have a 4-game week this week, so you'll get some volume out of Swayman. One guy that you can potentially get is Charlie Lindgren. So I had him at one point last year, 37% owned, so you can probably find him on the waiver wire right now. Now, this is something I was thinking about in the preseason, that their team defense was going to be much improved. So far, that is the case, 86th percentile there. Slightly below expected, but he has been the better of the 2 goaltenders. Logan Thompson, we can see here, his save percentage taking a huge nosedive after a couple of higher goal games where he did actually pick up the win. He's got 3 wins in 3 games, but a little bit more goals against and lower save percentage because the other team was not shooting that much. But you do want access to this team defense, and Lindgren only 37% owned. He might be a target for you if you're looking for that. Joel Blomqvist having a nice game last night in Vancouver, I believe it was. I don't have any data on him because he did not play last year, so we have to fix this as we go forward. But he is somebody that you should keep your eye on, as they did just send Tristan Jarry to the minors, and this is why. 15 on the goalie rating. I have not seen numbers this low in a long time. Husso, he's pretty much going to be an AHL guy at this point. Wedgwood had a rough start. I believe it was 1 game. Yeah, so that's a small sample size. So Jarry, an atrocious start to the season. 3 games, only 1 win, 5.5 goals against, 836 save percentage. Well, below expected, and the team D is not great at all. I believe at some point halfway through the game last night against Edmonton, Pittsburgh had 5 shots on goal. Edmonton had almost 30. So they are getting hemmed in their own end. So that was obviously Not a team you want exposure to, but of the two goaltenders that they do have, they have Nedeljkovic and they've got Blomqvist. Blomqvist seems to be getting the trust of the coaches to go out there and try to steal some games. And if he's going to do that, you might as well go and pick him up. He is only 8% owned, so you can go out there and find him on the waiver wire. I don't know if he's going to be the starter, but they are going to give him a relatively longer leash, at least at the time being. And Nedeljkovic is coming back off of an injury, so that might factor in as well. Now, in terms of other guys that you can potentially pick up off the waiver wire, one guy that I wanted to mention, at least in this context, is Tarasov. So if you're looking at Columbus, Merzlikin's not necessarily the best, but Tarasov at number 20, this Team D is surprisingly good right now. So that's something that I did not expect. It might be a small sample size thing, but save percentage isn't great. Goals against is not great, but this total save volume is okay, a little bit, 60th percentile there. But that team defense, for whatever reason, whether it is a small sample size or not, they seem to be playing pretty well defensively. They just cannot score goals at all. They're one of the lowest scoring teams in the league right now, and that will happen with all of the turmoil that's happened in the beginning of the season. So if they can get some run support, this would be a decent option. Tarasov is only 5% owned, so if you're looking for those deep league plays, he's a guy that may be a 1A at this point, and he's available on the waiver wire at 5%. You also have David Rittich. So coming into the season, Kemper was supposed to be the guy. He's been injured, and now it's between Rittich and Copley. And of the two, I think Rittich is the better goaltender. They're still a really good defensive team. They are playing a lot on the road right now as their building is being renovated. So once they get off of that, a lot of home games coming up for the Kings going forward, and that will favor them towards the middle section of the schedule and maybe even into the playoffs if they're playing a bunch of home games with less travel. And Rittich is available on the wire, 14% ownership. That save percentage is pretty bad. The goals against is not. He is a little bit below expected, so they might actually go out and try to find somebody in a trade, but maybe not this soon, maybe closer to the trade deadline if they don't have Kemper back. But that's going to do it for our look at the goaltending. Let me know who you've got your eye on in the comments section below. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.